Hello and welcome again to Chess for Beginners lesson number 11. My name is FM Steve, and today I want to take you again through chess openings. Now, last week I had promised to take you through the defenses in chess, but I find a very interesting opening for white that I want to mention before proceeding with the defenses, and this is the Evans Gambit. Now, first of all, the definition of a gambit. A gambit, a gambit is a chess opening move in which a player makes a sacrifice, typically of a pawn, for the sake of compensating advantage. Now, when we look at the Evans Gambit, and the reason why I felt like sharing it with you, it's a very nice gambit. Initially, I was not keen to talk about gambit openings because as a beginner, you tend not to give a free pieces or a free pawn. But if you can find a move or an opening that can get you an advantage, whether you are a pawn down and you know what you are doing, then it's still good. So let's talk about the Evans Gambit. Evans Gambit is a chess opening that white may tend to give more than a pawn. Evans Gambit was first played in the year 1824 by an English naval captain, W.D. Evans. Now, this gambit has proved a ferocious weapon in the hands of attacking players. The Evans Gambit is really a method of putting fire into the Giuoco Piano, which we looked at it earlier. So the moves goes E4, E5, Knight F3, Knight C6, Bishop C4, Bishop C5. So it's more of the starting of Giuoco Piano, and then now here B4 move. Now the plan is white is offering black a pawn to lure the bishop away from the center. So that's the idea. The next move, the bishop will be attacked by a C2, C3 pawn. So you can see it's going to be more of the gambit pawn. It's a free pawn. And then white will use the time he has gained to set up a massive pawn center with D2, D4. Now black's pieces will suffer because they have poor support in the center. And should he try to hit back with the D5, then he will have to recon with the bishop A3. So you can find that all advantages will lean towards white. So the game might continue after bishop takes B4, C3, bishop A5, and D4, pawn takes, then castled. So this is how the game might continue. Black needs to play D6, and now white will pick C takes D. It's coming with full of tactics. You can see black is way behind in development. And now if black plays a move like a normal developing move, talk of Knight F6, white has a very simple trick, Queen A4. And the plan here is very simple. It's a tactic. The tactic here is the bishop and the knight at C6 are connected, are kind coordinating. So what we need to do is to destroy the guard and win one piece. So if now the bishop moves to B6, D5 wins a piece because the knight was in a pin, and white emerges with an extra piece. If let's say black castles, still d5 move wins a piece. So it's an opening that black must know what he or she is doing. If you play someone who doesn't understand it, then definitely black will be in serious trouble. Now, there is, when I was taking through one of my students, we reached this position and I wanted to see what the student will do. Definitely, I was also trying to support her where she doesn't get it right. And at this point, she actually, at this point, if I take it slightly back, so after picking castled, she didn't actually play d6, the preferred move. And you can see how someone can be in serious problem. So she captured. Now here we talk about uh, black is 2 extra pawn and white captured. What's happening here is that black is 2 pawns ahead, but lagging behind in development. And this is very serious because at this point, white is regaining the pawn immediately. White can get the c3 pawn, white is attacking f7, and this is tempo, the initiative that is needed in chess to win. So black played queen e7, and you can see there is actually no point of going straight for the pawn. So you just need to keep pressing, and the more you bring your pieces into play, the more it's becoming difficult for black. Now the king is at the center, so what do we need to do? Open the central files. And it's very, very simple. That was played. So this is where white got it wrong, and we are going to see still white was attacking, but choice of squares matters most in chess. So white played queen to b5 check, but queen a5 was better. Queen a5 is winning straight because after queen a5, it's a check, knight is attacked, so knight has to go back. And then now you open the central file by picking pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. If you count the material, black is winning by 3 pawns, 3 pawns, but you can see the 2 pawns are going to fall immediately. And also there is an open file. So black has to worry about this file. Black has to, the rook might come anytime. So if this is played, rook, let's say rook takes a file, and black's moves are forced. Then add more pressure to the pieces pinned. There is a bishop pinned and there is a knight pinned. White gets back the pawns because when white gets the next pawn, at this point, white must regain one of the pawns. So white needs to regain the pawn, and when white regains the pawn, you can see the difficulty. White will regain all the pawns because when white gets one pawn back, the c3 pawn is soon going to fall, and the d6 pawn is weak. So this endgame is likely to favor white actually. The game is also open, and in any open play, it tends to favor the one with the bishop pair. Instead, in the game, the choice of square matters most in chess because in the game, after this kind of picks, and everything works in favor of, I'll take it slightly back. So when knight was played to a5, the queen moved to b5. So that was not so correct choice of square, and you'll see it a while. Why? Knight c6, pawn picks, rook there, rook e1, bishop e6 first, and now that's another mistake. It's a mistake because, as you'll see shortly, black somehow managed to get some defenses. If the pawn was at f7 and now white needs to play knight d4 with a serious attack, this becomes very serious. And you can see it's still kind of getting back the pawn and with attack. Instead, after this, white captured. And this pawn from f7 to e6 will support black to survive. Secondly, the queen at b5 also played a disadvantage to white. So if the queen was at f4, it could have been better. The continuation, knight attacks, looks like pressure. Now, if you play e5 here is bad. The reason why e5 is bad, knight will capture at c6, attacks the queen, and if black captures the pawn, the knight with the pawn, the queen captures back, it's a check, and the rook is falling. So that's bad. So at this point, e5 will be a mistake. If you play e5, because square d4 and square b5 are kind coordinating. So you need to understand squares. But if the queen is at a4, then e5 can be played somehow. So a6, just to get the queen is at a4, now e5. So the difference here is that after knight takes, you don't take immediately, because if you take immediately, queen captures, check, and you lose the rook. Instead, you pin the knight. So queen d7, and rook moved to d1. You can see white is playing very, very good. Very good. So my focus was in the opening, but still I'll just take you through how this game ended. So rook takes, and at this point, black must make serious decisions. And one of the decisions here is which pawn to let go. Two pawns are attacked, white is regaining all the pawns, but now which pawn should we let go? So it's better to let go the e5 pawn and keep the c6 pawn. The point is simple. The c6 pawn is a passed pawn, and this game is now nearing endgame. So now rook c8, we keep the c pawn, rook takes check, king f7. Now the game is at endgame. So at endgame, it's all about piece activity. There are things that will matter most in the game: piece activity, passed pawn, and you'll just see how interesting this game was. Because now rook c5, we want to keep the passed pawn. And the passed pawn here is, okay, we had given the hope of c3 pawn, so the c6 pawn is what we are more concerned. So knight e7, rook takes. Now what is wrong with white's position? There is a back rank threat, so improve the other rook, h to d8. That's another mistake, some sort. Now this game has now reached endgame, and you can see in endgame, which is our subject for future classes, but for the sake of this game and you know how it was played, after rook there, you just trade, and it's now black who has turned the table. Black's pieces are all of a sudden becoming active. King comes, and you can see passed pawn must be pushed. So it's becoming dangerous. King comes, king activity. White intends to play g4, so black played h5. h3 intending g4. Piece activity plays key role at endgame. And at this point, we need to make sure that we need to address each and every piece. You'll realize that the rook at c8 is active, but it needs to play a role of cutting off white's king. So the rook moved to c4, bishop. Somehow white is getting into zugzwang, and black needs to look for initiative. Now, since white is planning to play g4, black will play king e6 to avoid being attacked. So king attacks the bishop, bishop e5. And at this point, you need to figure out, we need to create a weakness, we need to put pressure on white's good pawn structure. So g5, that's initiative. They can't take the pawn, you take the bishop, and you are just making it hard for them to play g4 move. So h4, that's a mistake. Now we create a weakness, pawn structure, initiative, picks back, and the king becomes active. So you can see the game is just over. Now at this point, white has no good moves to play because white is in kind of zugzwang. So king there and king becomes active, and now the game is just but over. At this point, white resigned. I've just taken you through to the very end. So why it's very, it may be a very interesting opening, but at the same time, you have to know what you are doing. You have to be worried about, because when you give free pieces, when you give free pawns, it may turn against you as it turned against white here. But at the same time, it's a very interesting opening that you need to consider to play it, as long as you know how to take the advantages. So thank you. That has been our lesson. In our next lesson, I will proceed with the defenses. I just felt it was nice when I was taking through my student this opening, and I felt it's nice. It's a nice opening to always think about it. This has been FM Steve taking you through chess. Let's continue developing our chess together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel, Better Chess, on YouTube. So I wish you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year 2021. Thank you and stay blessed.